Baldwin, St. James Episcopal Church, and I answer them here on the air. Today's question has to do with favorites. A person wrote, did Jesus have favorites amongst the 12 disciples? Now, let's talk for a minute about who the disciples were. The disciples were 12 people, many of whom we know very little about, who followed Jesus throughout his time of earthly teaching in the areas of Galilee and Jerusalem. They came from all different walks of life, although most of them were sort of working class fellows, and they largely came from the area of Galilee. Now, some of the disciples we don't know anything about. Many of them we know a great deal about, and it's for that reason that we think that they might have had a special relationship with Jesus. There's no single favorite, perhaps, but there are three that certainly appear to be part of, well, let's call it an inner circle amongst the 12 disciples. That being Peter, James, and John. Peter is probably one of the best known because there are so many stories in the Gospels about him, such as Peter trying to walk on water or denying Jesus 3 times before the cock crows. James is a little familiar to us here at St. James Church. He was one of the fishermen and a friend of Peter and Andrew, brother of John, and the first of the disciples to die a martyr's death is depicted in the book of Acts. John is his brother, also a fisherman. He's one of the few disciples who, legend says, although it's not in Scripture, died of old age and did not die a martyr's death. Let's talk a little bit about what it means to be a favorite, though. These 3 figures were present at some significant moments in Jesus' ministry. Most importantly, the Transfiguration and Jesus going to the Garden of Gethsemane. Now, as we know from our Scripture readings, neither of those went pretty well for them. At the Transfiguration, Peter foolishly tries to build 3 temples to Jesus, Elijah, and Moses. And of course, in the Garden of Gethsemane, they weren't even able to stay awake with them. So being a favorite doesn't always necessarily mean you get to have a lot of perks in the job. Moreover, evidence suggests that Peter was not, even though he was perhaps the most prominent of the disciples, was not necessarily the leader of the early church. In the letters of Paul indicates that James, often referred to as the brother of Jesus, not to be confused with James the Lesser, who was a different disciple, or James, the one that we're named after, but rather a different figure entirely, was the head of the early church in the city of Jerusalem as part of the Christian community there. Peter went to Rome, which was sort of the New York City of its day, the largest of the communities, and was the leader of the church in that area, and he would eventually be martyred in the city of Rome. But he does not seem to have the top spot. It appears to be, as far as we can tell, that it's James in Jerusalem, who wasn't even one of the 12 disciples. For all that, though, I like to think about the other disciples, the disciples like Bartholomew that we don't know anything about, and think of them as sort of being like the patron saint of all the unsung heroes of Christianity, that there was a place in the church for people whom obviously Jesus knew and cared about and had special gifts and talents, but for whatever reasons whose histories weren't written down in the Scriptures. Thanks for a great question, and I look forward to all of your questions here at Ask Father Rob. You can send your question to me, Father Rob Baldwin, care of St. James Episcopal Church, 200 West High Street, Piqua, Ohio, 45356, or you can email them to us at stjamespiqua, that's stjamespiqua @yahoo.com. Look forward to seeing you here each and every afternoon, or you can visit us live at 10 o'clock at our regular services here at 200 West High Street at St. James Episcopal Church, where we nurture the faith of every generation.